Hi guys and welcome back to a new video. My name is Martina and this is the Secret Craft Room. In today's video I'm going to show you how I made this wall decor piece using a cheap dollar store skeleton and some trash. Please give my video a thumbs up and subscribe if you like my content. And without further ado, let's get into the video. The very first thing I did was to cut off the lower part of the skeleton using a small handsaw. Then I took some measurements to decide how big I wanted the frame to be. I also used super glue to glue the mouth shut. Next I made a rough sketch of the frame and what pieces I need to cut from cardboard. I didn't have cardboard pieces that were big enough, so I split the largest piece into 6 different pieces which I glued together using hot glue. I made the back with double layers of cardboard because I wanted to make sure it would be able to hold the weight of the skeleton without bending. To easier cut out the side pieces and the front pieces for the frame, I made templates from regular paper. I wanted the frame to be 8 cm in width and 5 cm in depth. Since the frame was so big I couldn't show you how I made it properly, so I decided to show you how I did with a much smaller piece. First I added 5 cm wide strips of cardboard around the outer edge of the base. Then I glued on tiny bits of cardboard as support for the front pieces. If you are making a small frame you might not need this, but when making a large frame these supports will prevent the cardboard pieces on top from bending. Then I glued on the 8 cm wide cardboard pieces. Then I measured the inner part to determine how wide those cardboard pieces needed to be. Then I covered the whole piece with a layer of paper mache. Once completely dry, I added a layer of spackle to the frame part. And once that were completely dry, I sanded it down as smooth as possible. Don't worry if it's not perfectly smooth, because that will add some character to the frame. Next I painted the frame with light brown acrylic paint. I used a sharp tool to create a diagonal line at each corner to make it look more realistic. Then I dry brushed on darker brown with a stiff brush. This will create lines that will mimic wood grain. Then I repeated this step with an even darker shade of brown. I used spackle to fill in the holes in the skeleton. You could also use hot glue. I cut off the hands so it would be easier to attach them to the candle. To make the candle I used a remote control tea light and toilet paper rolls. To make the candle a little bit thicker, I glued some thick paper around it. Then I cut out a piece for the bottom from thin cardboard and glued it in place. Then using the tea light I marked out the top where the light will be and cut that off. Then I glued on a piece of thin cardboard and then I glued on the cut off piece again. Now the tea light should be easy to remove whenever you need to change the battery. Next I mixed equal parts water and PVA glue and used it to add toilet paper to the outside of the candle. Once completely dry I added hot glue to make an edge at the top and also to mimic wax strips. I do recommend taking the tea light out before doing this because the heat from the hot glue is not good for the battery. Then I mixed black paint with baking soda and painted the candle with it. The baking soda will create an old and gritty texture. Don't forget to do the same with the tea light. Next I cut off all the little bone pieces of each finger. Make sure not to cut off the pieces that doesn't belong to the fingers. Then I glued the pieces to the candle to make it look like the hand is holding the candle. Then I did the same with the thumb. I am not an expert at anatomy, I just aligned everything the way I thought looked good and real enough. Then I glued on the other hand to make it look like it's sort of supporting the candle rather than holding it. Then I reinforced at all the places I had glued the pieces together. I tried to make sure to make it look like it is part of the bone. Next I added wallpaper inside the frame that I printed out on a regular printer. I used Mod Podge to seal in the paper. Then I used brown acrylic paint to dry brush the background to make it look old and worn. Next I glued the arms and hands in place. This took me a while to figure out how to do and to align the arms properly. I glued a small piece of a glue stick to the rib cage to create some space between the skeleton and the candle. Then I used some zip ties to hold the candle in place while I attached the arms. Once I was happy with the placement of the arm, I added more glue to reinforce it. Then I did the same thing to the other arm. I also added some toilet paper to the bigger joints, both as reinforcement and also to hide any weird looking parts. Next I used hot glue to cover the parts of the skeleton that had unnatural joints in the plastic. Then I mixed black paint and baking soda and covered the whole skeleton with it. Once completely dry, I dry brushed the whole skeleton with a bone white shade of acrylic paint. I made quite a heavy dry brush with more paint on the brush than what you typically use when you dry brushing. This is because this is not the first skeleton I painted, so I know how thick I want this layer to be. But you can build this up in layers instead if you prefer that. Next I added a little bit of brown and black paint to water to create a wash and added this to the skeleton. I used paper to wipe away the excess as I went along. Then I added back some details using black paint. I also painted the candle black again. I decided that the frame looked a little bit too plain, so I added a border to it using air dry clay. The clay tend to shrink a little bit when drying, and this created some gaps in the border. I filled these gaps with small blobs of hot glue. Then I painted it dark brown. And then I dry brushed some gold paint on top. Then I covered both the skeleton and the frame with a coat of matte Mod Podge. To attach the skeleton to the frame, I made holes for zip ties at 3 different places along the spine. Then I added a lot of hot glue on the back of the skeleton before placing it in the frame. Please ignore the zip ties that are already in place. I removed those and added new ones. You want the lock of the zip tie on the front, so I put the zip tie through the front to the back and then to the front again through the second hole. I hope this makes sense. This will make sure that the back of the piece stays as flat as possible. Then I glued on a whole bunch of moss. The zip ties doesn't show very much, but I still wanted to cover them with moss. And I also added moss around the frame and wherever I thought it looked good. The very last thing I did, which I should have done before adding the skeleton to the frame, was to add hangers to the back of the piece. Since this turned out quite heavy, I added 2, one in each corner. Please don't forget to subscribe and give my video a thumbs up if you liked it. And if you watched this far, please leave your favorite Halloween emoji in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.